Hi.
Good morning. Morning, Natalia.
How are you?
I'm good yourself.
Very well, thanks.
Great. Yeah, we meet again.
We do, and we're doing all these exciting virtual meetings. We've become quite good at them, hey?
Yeah. Well, you are the maestro there. I'm good yourself.
Very well, thanks. Sorry, I've just got a bit of feedback there. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, you'll start the recording as soon as we start it.
Yes, yeah. We're 5 minutes out, so we've still got some time, but I can see there are 6 people in the waiting room. So as soon as we are ready to go, I will start recording and I will let everyone in the room. Cool. Good.
Let me see, at least it gives me a chance just to see my Savrala thing.
Your background.
Comes out nicely there.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, look, what can you do? The preparations for these things, I mean, this 2 hours, the whole of this week, and I can tell you now, it takes a a toll on one.
I know, it's a lot of work putting an AGM pack together, that is for sure, yeah. And also
Anyway,
you're doing it on your own, which makes it difficult.
That's the problem. You know, I mean, I wish for the day when things will change in Savrala, and then we can just, you know, at least, you know, I can be much more resourced than I am at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no. So, all right. Yeah, I think that's the lowdown. Then I was expecting Kone to be, you know, to have joined us, because we agreed that at least if we could all just be slightly early. So that
No, I don't see Kone in the waiting room. So he hasn't arrived yet. I've got Warren Fletcher, Francis Human, Renew Lowe, Bradley Salters, Adele Nell, Gary Scott, Derek DeFries, Peter Jacobs, and Mikhail Mabasa in the waiting room.
Great. I think, yeah, I'm sure they can come in. You know, I mean,
shall I just let them all in?
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I'm sure you can let them all in.
All right, I'm letting everyone in, and I'll start recording.
I guess you'll have that first slide up.
Yeah, I'll put it up now. It's just getting everyone into the room. Morning, everyone. We're just waiting to start at 10 o'clock sharp. We're 3 minutes out. I'm just letting you all in the room so that we can just check that everything is working technically. And we are also streaming on YouTube. Morning.
Right. Yeah. How? Yeah, the link was on the invite from, it would have come from Bigger.
How's it, Sandeli?
Hi, Tony. I've just muted Sandile because he's on a call. Sandile, I've just muted you, so when you are ready to unmute yourself, please go ahead.
Good morning. There you are. Oh yeah, Grenville was battling slightly, so he's in.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
Morning, Derek.
Morning, all.
Morning, Helen. Okay, we're 1 minute out. I'm still letting people into the room.
Okay.
Right, Sandile, we are on at 10 o'clock. I don't know if you'd like to give it another minute or if we should get going.
Let's just give it another minute, Natalia.
Okay, great.
And then, just make sure that at least we've got.
So we unmute.
So Grenville, you're just currently muted.
So you'll tell us when it's our turn to speak, and then we won't share our screen. You'll run the presentation. Is that
Exactly,
correct?
yes. Yeah.
Great.
I'll do a little bit of housekeeping before we get going as well, just so that everybody's on the same page.
Cool. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Are you in? Did you manage to get in? All right.
Okay, shall we get going?
I think we can get going.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Formally, my name is Natalia. I'm going to be handling the tech behind the scenes today. Thanks so much for joining our Savrala AGM this morning. I know this is a new world, so everything is being done online. I'm sure, though, that you have all got a lot of experience as pertains to Zoom. I know that we've spent our lives on Zoom since March. But for those of you who would just like a little bit of an overview, this is not a webinar, it is a virtual meeting, which means you have the power to mute and unmute. You also have the power to share your video or hide your video. The chat is open, so please feel free to use the chat if you have any comments or any questions. And I would just ask you to please keep yourself on mute unless you've been called on to talk, just so that we can avoid any background noise and so that the recording of the session doesn't have any videos that pop up, because when you make a sound, your video pops up as the speaker view. So please keep yourself on mute. If you'd like to say something or ask a question, you can do that in the chat, or you can use the non-verbal raise hand icon, and we will then call on you to let us know what's on your mind. I think that's it from a housekeeping perspective. We are also streaming this on YouTube and we are recording the session. If you have any questions, please let me know. With that, I'd like to hand over to Sandile.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Thank you once more. to everyone for joining the meeting. Perhaps before we start, if you could just, take the team through the association competitive notice. I think it's important without going through the rest of what's written in there. I need to just, impress upon everyone that, we will ensure and we will make sure that we exercise caution, that this meeting is not about collusion, but just to discuss, relevant issues that affect the industry. On that note, I think, it's something that I've always shared with the members, and I'm sure some of you can recite it by now. If we can perhaps move on, just to share before I share the agenda, let me just, I think it's important for us, we've gone through quite a bit, what a truly devastating year 2020 has turned out to be. Before we are addressed on the state of our industry, please join me in a moment of silent reflection as we remember our colleagues, friends, and loved ones who have succumbed to COVID-19 or are grieving, and also to pray for full and speedy recoveries for those who are currently infected or who are suffering the physical effects and emotional distress brought on by COVID-19 and the crisis it has wrought upon our industry, our economies, and our community. Thank you. Deputy President of Savrala, Mr. Kone Fente, the members of Savrala NEC, the CEO of NAMSA, Mr. Mike Mabasa, the Vice President of NAMSA and the CEO of Kia Motors, Gary Scott, Chief Executives, board members and executives of our member car rental and leasing sections, associate members, industry associations, and guest associations, and all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you on this, our very important 2020 AGM. Our AGM always takes place in the month of, October, which is normally the transport month. And I liaise a lot during the period with the Department of Transport, based on some of the initiatives we do with them. And unfortunately, this year, there is no decided theme, as the Department of Transport is planning for the festive season with a launch on the 13th of November. Last year the theme was Together We Move South Africa Forward. I think it's still fairly relevant in this day and age. We have to work together to move, South Africa forward. In terms of just the agenda for the day, our day is very much packed. Normally, under normal circumstances, we would have this meeting, physically, and it normally is a 3-hour meeting where we take you through the various, stats. But fortunately, we've only just recently had a members meeting where a lot of update was given to members. However, this is basically the agenda of the first part of this meeting. I have already welcomed you, and I'd like to welcome those who've also just joined in, and welcome to our AGM. The notice of the meeting was sent out, and I have recorded a few apologies that have been sent to me without naming them, but I've received a couple of emails, of those who could not make the meeting. And I'm sure that some have gone through to our secretariat. This is a combined rental and leasing association, leasing sectional meeting. So whereas in the past we'd have these as separate and then combine when the second part of the AGM starts, this time around, as we did last year, we'll have it as one meeting. I'd like to just confirm the minutes that were also circulated by the secretariat along with the agenda, and take those as read. And at this stage, perhaps give an opportunity for the members if there's any sort of matters arising out of the minutes. I don't know if there's any, so that we can accept them as a true reflection. A couple of sets of minutes were sent out. It was the minutes of the last AGM last October, and then the minutes of the recent members meeting that we had last month. So as I said, I take those as read. Now, there's some difference here in that this particular session will, basically, be, it's the session where the various chairpersons of the various sections will basically take us through, the updates on where we are, how we've done in 2019 in the various sections, that is car rental and the leasing section. And afterwards, we'll have then the secretariat, Warren Fletcher, who will then take us through the sectional, elections of the sectional office bearers. So I'd like to basically just at this stage hand over to Granville, who will take us through, the rental section, some of the key highlights for 2020, and hand over to you, Granville.
Thank you, Sandile. Yeah, it's amazing to think that in January we were worried about the state of the economy and corruption. Now we just long for those wonderful times when all we had to worry about was corruption and a semi-decent economy. Okay, just to give some insights into the state of the car rental industry and the tourism industry in South Africa, I've got some stats for you. So the two busiest air flight routes in Africa pre-COVID were Johannesburg to Cape Town. There were 13,000 travelers a day. And Johannesburg to Durban, there were 8,000 travelers a day. Cape Town had just entered into the world's top, the Cape Town-Johannesburg domestic routes had just entered into the world's top 10 most busy routes. So tourism was really doing well in South Africa then. Until the 18th of August, when we moved to level 2, free travel was not allowed between these two destinations for leisure purposes, and air traffic is still way down. If you look at the AXA statistics, OR Tambo had 1 million arrivals and departures in September 2019. In September 2020, we had 277,000 arrivals and departures. So that's a 73% decrease in air traffic on that route. Then, one thing that we never kind of realized, we obviously realized it, but we didn't realized the extent of it was that car rental really was riding the wave of cheap air travel. And we are hugely dependent on air travel, not only international, but also local travel. And yeah, with the acceptance of meetings like this, Zoom and Teams meetings, we may just find that it takes years before people hop on a plane for a meeting again. An interesting catch-22 that we found ourselves in at the start of the lockdown was that we were not able to operate our car rental businesses, and we were not allowed to retail vehicles. This left us with huge costs and no way to reduce these costs for most of April, May, and June. This meant that many car rental businesses spent the last few days before the lockdown parking cars all over the country, and many of those vehicles are still parked in those exact same locations. I've done a little comparison between January and August. In January, we were running a fleet of about 70,000 vehicles. That's now reduced to 45,000 vehicles, which is a 34% decrease. The average kilometers driven with our vehicles has decreased from 150 million to 50 million. Revenue. And bear in mind that August was actually a great month for us. It was the first sort of signs that we might be coming back to normal. August revenue was down 71%, from 600 million in January to 170 million in August. Rental days are down 64% to just under 600,000 rental days. And utilization of vehicles in August, which was a good month for us, a lot of positive talk around the car rental industry. Utilization was less than 50%. The average rental vehicle was used for only 13 days during August. Let that sink in while you consider that August was a great month. Okay. From a Savrala point of view, it has been one of the busiest years, and we've had amazing results from our efforts. Some of the new regulations that were promulgated were taken verbatim from the Savrala submissions. And although we did not always get our way, we did have an amazing team and lots of input from great people. So, you know, just a couple of the things, when they changed the levels, car rental was moved from level 2 to level 4. That was one of the big wins that we had. Unfortunately, many people in the car rental industry have lost their jobs, and we face a tough task resizing and regrowing our businesses. With Tito Mboweni at the purse strings, it's nice to see some logical decisions have been made in government. Arrests have been made with respect to corruption, and certain state entities seem to be on the mend, while others are still in decline. Yeah, the increased speed at which governments has implemented legislation and regulation gives us an idea of what can be done if South Africa works together as one. And to quote our most successful team, we are stronger together. So some of the big rocks we've been pushing this year, as normal, our safety initiative and crime initiative. We had a brilliant teamwork when we got some vehicles back from Lesotho. There was a syndicate stealing vehicles and taking them into Lesotho, and we've got a new WhatsApp group with some of the heads of the SAPS, which has been brilliant. People are using rental cars to, you know, kidnap children, commit ATM crimes, all of those type of things. And on that WhatsApp group, people, you know, the police will say, is this whose rental? It looks like a rental car. This is a rental car. And immediately we can get back to them, tell them all the details about that vehicle. And quite a lot of the vehicles now have tracking, which has really been a feather in the cap in terms of fighting crime. So very good. There has been a lot more fraud since COVID started. And I think these new criminals are learning the hard way that you have to be relatively stupid to steal a rental vehicle or use a rental vehicle for crime, because you are going to get caught. Our main focus for the new year is ARTA and NATIS. So the big issue there pertains to the difference between fleets and individuals, and applying the rules for individuals to fleets, because what's happening is that they're going to withdraw the license of vehicles if there's too many infringements on a vehicle, and that could be major for the car rental industry. So that will be our focus in the coming year in terms of Savrala and working together. Yeah, then operating permits for passenger transport and trying to equalize with Uber. Road safety has COVID has a brilliant impact on road safety. With less road usage, there have been less accidents. And although road safety has not been top of mind, one of the things that is apparent is that alcohol causes accidents. Safe roads means lower accident rates and lives saved. Our three major focus areas for the coming year will be road safety programs to get the government to allocate more budget, better roads and better policing of laws, and compulsory third-party insurance. That's something we're petitioning for. A couple of the other committees haven't been as active as they were. The Damages and Accidents Committee has not been meeting as frequently as they used to, and the TransUnion Closed User Group is meeting, although remotely. So in conclusion, 2020 has been a year where 2020 has been a year where we've understood the importance of having a strong team at Savrala and a unified voice when speaking to government. Although there have been massive downs, they may have been lessened due to the teamwork that we've shown amongst the car rental businesses in South Africa. It's been an honor to serve as the chairman of Savrala, and I wish everybody the best for the upcoming year, and I hope we all make it through to the other side and emerge better and stronger as an industry and individual businesses. Good luck for Moti, to all the manufacturers, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Grenville. Really appreciate that. I'm just going to share my screen again and ask Brian to get ready because he is next on our agenda. So Brian, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hi, Natalia. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Excellent. Good morning to all. Thanks, Grenville. Thanks, Andili. I just want to use the opportunity to also thank Natalia from Big Ambitions. I'd like to thank the NEC members for their contribution in the past 12 months, with special mention to Corné Venter, who's brought a new energy to Savrala, and also Sandili, who's kept us informed during the hard part of the lockdown. And through him, we've been able to participate and give input to government, as Grenville has mentioned as well. And as Grenville mentioned, quite a lot of the submissions we've made were successful. And we thank everyone for being part of that. You'll see that my main heading for this year has been the 2020 can pretty much be described as like a train wreck happening in slow motion. And I mean, for me, that's pretty much what it has been. In one sense, it's quite funny because it's like a very marked ad. You think, well, there can't be more. And then you think, but no, there's more. Just when you thought everything is over. On the highlight side, we'd like to welcome the new member, Thales Fleet, to Savrala. And I'd also like to just highlight the fact that now with leasing back within Savrala, we've got 4 years of data that we can mine. And I think from that it's quite clear that even though we've only correlated industry data up to the second quarter of 2020, we can already see a 12% reduction in fleet size combined, obviously, over all the various categories. So it has already had a meaningful impact on the Savrala on the leasing side. And it'll be interesting to see that pretty much later this month, we're going to send out the submissions for the third quarter. So it'll be quite interesting to see after that what the effect would be in the hard part of the lockdown to the industry. I'm quite proud of the new Fair Wear and Tear guide that has gone live today. And so we urge all members to obviously use that as the new reference. The old Fair Wear and Tear guide was quite old, and we used the opportunity to get input from across the industry, and we went as far as even looking at what our colleagues in Australia were doing as far as the Fair Wear and Tear guide was concerned, and we updated it thoroughly. So the new Sandile this morning sent out a correspondence with a new link that you're most welcome to access to get the new Fair Wear and Tear guide. Then we're also quite proud of the fact that through Southern Business School, we've signed a contract, and on our behalf, they'll now be presenting a new advanced diploma in fleet management. And just for those that are not aware of it, it was put together with industry experts, and it talks to the lingo and methodology that we actually use in industry. So it's not something that was edited from overseas or anything. It really is specific to South Africa. So for those looking for skills development training course, I can really recommend this is an advanced diploma, and there's also entry-level diplomas that are available through Southern Business School. If there's anyone with interest, you're most welcome to make contact with Sandile on that front. Natalie, yeah, thank you. As far as the focus of 2021, again, like Grenville has mentioned, I think for us on the leasing side, I can't stress the risk of R2 enough to the industry. I mean, this piece of legislation, and I was slowly reading through the feedback that we got from government recently, and it doesn't appear that they've actually changed their stance as far as the financier of the vehicle is concerned. And I mean, as Grenville has said, I mean, the ramifications for this is immense. This could paralyze the leasing and rental industry as we know it. And I mean, it's something that we could ill afford in this economic situation that we're in. So I really urge everyone, including the manufacturers. I know in my discussion with various OEMs, they've up to now been of the opinion doesn't really affect them. But I think what they need to understand is the fact that if a fair bit of their sales annually goes toward rental and leasing, and if you lose that, you are going to be affected. So I think I really urge everyone, we've got less than 60 days to respond to what you received back from government. We have a subcommittee that deals with it. So again, if you're not sure, make contact with Sandile so that we can get you to give us good feedback that we can go back to government with on that front. Then again, I think the slide talks to the fact that what I call the 2020 moral dilemma that we face. And again, as South Africa, using wording that was coined by Clem Santa, I don't know, more than 20 years ago, I think probably now 30 years ago, we spoke about the high road and the low road. And I think pretty much that's where South Africa, we face ourselves. And I think we need to understand that as an industry, we could keep on with this attitude that the government has had for the last 20 years, where pretty much the attitude has been, let's just leave it, it'll probably fix itself. Or if we ignore it, it might just go away. And I think that if you look at what has happened to Eskom, if you look what has happened to SA, that's the fruits that we bear today of that type of attitude. So I think taking the low road here ends up with not a positive result for the country. I think taking the high road, I think, is the only option that we have. And I think we need to understand that if you look at the problem that government face at the moment is the fact that they actually can't fund the high road option. The only way this will work is with partnership with the private sector. And I think as an industry, we need to recognize that and understand that we need to participate and again, I think with that, we're all looking forward later today to the President's recovery plan that he'll be presenting. If we go to the next slide, thank you. obviously, I think talking about this moral road that we face, I think one of the things that have become quite apparent has been the fact that the sheer size and scope of corruption that we faced has become apparent during 2020 has been immense, much bigger than I think than anyone has actually realized. And I think you get to the point where you think, well, not who is corrupt, but I mean, who's left, who still has a moral compass. And I think it's good to know that there is a small resolute team left in government that do have that stance. And I think it's very much incumbent on us to support them. With that said, I think unfortunately, as business, we're not really in a position to point fingers at them, because I think there's been good examples over the last couple of years where listed companies have been caught out cooking the books, and even audit companies looking the other way. So I think as a society, we really at a crossroads where we need to say to ourselves, we need to look at our moral fiber here in terms of saying, well, we need to look at ourselves hard and say, what is required of us in terms of acting responsibly, professionally, and with moral conviction? And what does that entail as business? Does it, and I think we need to be more sensitive towards that in terms of, because I think what's happened in the past is we get these requests where we participate with government tenders and the like, and then we've maybe not been too vocal in terms of identifying right up front that if they go down this road in terms of what they're requesting, this might end up being embarrassing in the future. So I think we need to be more proactive as far as that is concerned. And I think the message for me today, as on the leasing side, is very much that for us to change the moral fiber of society, it really starts with us. That we need to look at ourselves and say, well, we need to start acting more professionally, and that will hopefully drive the sentiment. We need a bit of momentum as far as that is concerned. And with that said, I mean, that then also means that we need to look at ourselves in terms of treating our customers fairly. And when it comes to contract restructures and the like, that we do act what is appropriate and not exploit the situation for what it is. And then I think I just, in closing, just want to say that, excuse me, it's become quite apparent now over the last couple of months that the president is quite isolated politically, and we need to understand that there's not a lot of support below him, and it really is up to business to be support in fixing this problem, because as I said before, this is not something that we can look at government and say, okay, please go and fix this for us. We need to acknowledge that we need to be part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brian. Sorry, I had to try and find my mute button at the same time. I have put the AGM agenda up because we are heading into the second session at the moment, and I'd like to call on Warren Fletcher, please, to unmute himself because he will be leading that second session. Warren, the floor is yours.
Hi, Natalia. Sorry, if I can just interject. We're not quite at the second meeting just yet, in the sense that we still need to just appoint our office bearers in the relevant rental and leasing section, but all good. As I say, it's really just the pieces of paper for now. So morning, everybody. If I can just lead you into the nominations for the various sectional chairpersons and vice chairpersons. Just to give a bit of background, obviously, for those that are new to the game, the way it has happened in the past, as you would have experienced, is I generally send a nomination form out to all the members. They then give their persons of choice. Then what I do is I approach those nominated persons and establish if they are willing to actually accept the nomination. To the extent that they are, they'll go on a list, and that's the list that we will vote for today. I will then also call for additional nominations from the floor if there are any. In terms of the challenge of having a virtual vote, I think if it comes to that, with Natalia's help, I think when the person is nominated and a vote is required, if you would, where you raise your hand for a question, if you the affirmatives. Person, if you can raise your hand on that basis. And what we'll do is we will facilitate the elections, and then what I'll do post the meeting is I'll just do a mini audit to ensure that those that could vote did vote, and those that were entitled to vote or weren't entitled to vote then get knocked off the list. But sadly, that appears to be the only way that we would be able to do the vote. So on that note, just to also raise two issues, you would have seen on the nomination form that was sent electronically that if you are not a paid up member, then you are not entitled to vote. And also as a non-paid up member, you are not eligible to stand for the NEC. That said, in terms of the first election, that being for the rental chair, having gone through the process that I've just alluded to, at the moment, I have two nominations that have confirmed their acceptance of the nomination, those being Grenville Salmon, as well as Martin Liddell from the Motus Group. I'm assuming that there are no other nominations from the floor. If there are, if you could just unmute yourself and mention the name to me. Okay, so I would assume on that basis that no other nominations are given. If I could then just ask, in terms of the vote for both Grenville and for Martin, obviously in the good old days, you used to have to leave the room, but I don't think that's really pertinent today. So if I can just ask in the election of the rental chair, for Grenville, those in favor of having Grenville as their rental chair, if they can just show by means of a show of hands. Natalia, can you just tell me if it's working?
So I'm not seeing anybody raising their hands. Okay, there we go. Rizal has raised a hand.
Either a hand or a, what do they call it, a reaction, just so that we can get an email and a...
Natalia, I'm just suggesting you may want to just remove this so that at least we can see everyone on the screen here. Yeah,
yes,
that's
I
right.
think actually that we
and
are
then in this way it will work.
We're not using we're using the non-verbal cue, not the physical hand. But if you want me to do both, that's fine. Most people have their videos off, so it's a bit difficult to see if they've got their hands up. So I've got Tony up, Peter up, Rizal, Queen, Hugo, Peter, Bridget, Barbara.
I mean, can I, off the back of this, get a numerical amount at the end?
I have to do it manually, which is quite complicated. Can I ask all of you, sorry, we're fixing the plane while we're flying it. In the chat, can you please indicate if you are voting for this particular individual in the chat? Because then we can have it written and I can pull a chat report for you, Warren, after the event.
In fact, that's a great idea. And so, in fact, if the person can either vote for Grenville or for Martin, so if they can just put the name and then obviously on a numerical basis, if you can just do that for me, then we'll know who voted for Martin and who voted for Grenville, and then we have a winner.
Perfect. So if you're voting for Martin, please just indicate in the chat that you're voting for Martin. If you're voting for Grenville, please indicate in the chat that you're voting for Grenville, and then we will have that documented.
Warren, it's Brad here. Just to clarify, only the rental members are voting here, I assume?
That would be the case, yes.
Okay.
The rental members and the OEMs.
And the OEMs, everyone, yeah, all the members.
But not the leasing members.
Not the leasing members. Sorry, it's a bit of a delayed process, unfortunately, but it is what it is.
We have 11 votes for Grenville thus far, and we have 5 votes for Martin thus far.
Okay, so we'll give it another 10 seconds, and if we don't get any more, it would be assumed then that Grenville has taken the vote, and on that basis that he would be elected the rental chairperson.
Another vote for Grenville. Another vote for Martin. Another vote for Martin.
Okay, can we take it then that all voting is in for the rental chair? And congratulations to Grenville for his appointment as the rental chairperson. You can just wave, Grenville. There we go. That's the man. Okay, moving on. I think on the same principle for the vice chair of the rental section. Again, through the process, we also have we had 2 nominations, those being Grenville, who's effectively been elected as the rental chair, and Ramasela Ganda. I'm not sure if there are any other nominations from the floor in terms of the rental vice chair. Okay, on the basis that I'm not hearing any other nominations and that there are effectively, I'm assuming, Grenville, you don't want 2 positions?
Right. What about Martin? I don't know if maybe I can put Martin forward for vice if he's
Okay, so
willing to accept.
Okay, so are you making a nomination?
Yes.
Okay, is Martin with us today?
He's not in the participants list.
I know he was.
If I may also just suggest that it's important that you know, Warren, that you at least indicate who these individuals are. People may not necessarily know who Martin is and who Ramasela is. It's also just important, particularly for the you know, the other members that may not be closer.
Okay, I can do that. I'm not sure what the positions are within their organizations, but Ramasela is from Avis and Martin is from the Motors Group. So on the basis that Martin is not Corne, can we accept that Martin would be available for the vice chair position?
Warren, I would obviously have to canvass with him. I mean, so I think the discussion was around chair, but I don't think there'll be any objection to vice chair. So I think if there is a nomination, I think let's put it forward, and I think let's put him as part of the process.
Okay, so on the basis of that, then it would again be the 2 candidates, obviously Ramasela Ganda and then Martin Lydell from the Motors Group. So if we can apply the same rationale.
The ones that we left is prior, there's no any hell that we can end them.
Okay, so in the chat, if you could please paste Ramasela or Martin in the chat to select your nominee.
Yeah, so, well, it's currently at stake.
How are we doing, Natalia?
We have 4 votes so far, 3 of which are for Martin and 1 for Ramasela.
You guys are allowed to vote more than once, eh? So, or not. I'm not saying more than once from the same person, but if you voted for the rental chair, you are entitled to vote for the vice rental position as well.
2 votes for Ramasela, 3 votes for Ramasela, 3 votes for Martin, 4 votes for Ramasela, 3 votes for Martin.
Obviously, we had 19 votes for the rental chair, so there are a few more people that can vote. If we could ask you that you put your hand up and pick somebody.
Seven votes for Ramasela, 3 votes for Martin. It's a very interesting way of doing voting.
The challenges of the digital age.
In so many ways, it has simplified our lives, and in so many other ways, it's just made it complicated.
Okay, we'll give it another few seconds.
8 votes for Ramasela, 3 votes for Martin.
Okay, I think it's safe then to say that in terms of those that have voted, that Ramasela has taken the nod. So I think congratulations to Ramasela and welcome to the NEC as the rental vice chairperson. I think I did see him. He is in attendance as well. So
It's a her.
Her, sorry. All right. So we have completed the voting with regards to the rental section.
There's Ramasela.
Ramasela, congratulations. So the same principle would apply then with the leasing section. Obviously, in this instance, the leasing and the OEMs, the leasing members and the OEMs vote, and the rental members pass on this one. In terms of the leasing chair, again, having gone through the eliminations, etc., we have 2 candidates. We have Brian Roos, who is the current incumbent from 58 Fleet, and we have Linda Kambule from Standard Bank. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Okay, I'm assuming no more nominations. So again, same principle. If you could then put either Linda's name or Brian's name on your responses, and that is for the leasing chairperson.
Five votes for Brian, 1 vote for Linda. 2 votes for Linda, 6 for Brian, 3 for Linda. Four for Linda. Six for Brian, 4 for Linda. Seven for Brian. Seven for Brian.
Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds, guys and girls.
Nine for Brian. 10 for Brian. 4 for Linda.
Okay, on that basis, I'm going to take it that the successful nominee was Brian Roos. So congratulations, Brian, on your appointment to the leasing chairperson.
Thanks, Warren.
Then if we move on to the leasing vice chair, and this is a little bit more complicated. One of the nominees, again, in the vice chair position was Brian, who's obviously been nominated as the chairperson. The other nomination was Peter Jacobs, but he was only really accepting of the appointment if he was the only candidate. At this point, that would indicate that he is, unless we have any other nominations from the floor for the vice chair. I'm not sure if, from Linda's perspective, if someone would want to nominate her in the position as vice chair as well.
Hi, Warren. It's Brian here. Can I nominate her for vice?
Okay, perfect. Linda, would you be happy to be vice? Is Linda with us?
I don't see Linda in your list of participants.
And Peter, are you happy to accept the nomination now, if in effect Linda's not able to give her confirmation?
I would. But I think that we should vote anyway with Linda as an option.
Okay, Derek, that's fine.
I see that Stefanus has got his hand.
Linda.
Sorry, what was that?
I see that Stefanus has raised his hand.
Okay, so guys, in terms of the vote, it'll be between Linda and well then, Peter, are you stepping down or are you accepting the nomination?
I'll accept it.
Okay. All right, so if I can ask the leasing members and the OEMs in terms of the leasing vice chair, if they could either put Peter or Linda as their nominee for leasing vice chair.
Can I just quickly interrupt? Linda is a man and not a lady.
I apologize.
Please. Thank you.
Linda is getting the majority. Well, all of the votes so far are for Linda. (13, 14, 15). All votes for Linda thus far. 16. Votes for Linda.
Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, I think we can accept that Linda has taken the nomination in this regard. And that would obviously then close the nominations and the elections with regards to the two sections being rental and leasing. So if I can just confirm, the rental chairperson is Grenville Salmon, the vice chair, Ramasea Laganda. In the leasing section, Brian Roos is the chair and Linda Kambula is the vice chair. So if I could just offer my congratulations to the new incumbents. And then hand back to Sandile.
Thank you, Warren. Sandile, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me also just congratulate the incoming NEC members and congratulate them on faring well, and I look forward to working with them. At this stage, we move on to basically the second session of our agenda. Again, the various agenda for the last AGM in 2019 was circulated, and together with the the agenda for this session. So if we perhaps, I'll take that as read. I know we're not doing pretty well on time, and we still have a couple of items that are very, very important as well, that will take us through the President's report and the financials that the members have got to at least, get to understand. So in terms of the apologies, I would really record basically the same sort of apologies. I think I have received, and those will be, specified accordingly in the forthcoming minutes.
Sandile?
Yeah.
Apologies, it's Reiner here.
Hi, Reiner.
Sorry, I've raised my hand, so apologies for interjecting. I just want to go back, if you don't mind, just to the NEC. Want to just check if there's any objection to nominating Martin just as a NEC member and not necessary to a specific role, just to strengthen the NEC.
But if I may come in, yeah, because that gets done by the NEC itself. That's what we call, the co-opted members, Reiner. So, naturally we do that. I think one of the key things we want to do, as discussed previously, is to strengthen the NEC. And and certainly that would be welcome, but it's a decision now that will be taken by the NEC to have 2 co-opted members.
It doesn't have to be 2. The NEC can adopt as many as they want, but that, as I said, that normally falls within the decision-making process of the NEC.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we cover it.
Perfect.
Apologies for interrupting.
Yes, I'm sure it will be recorded. Thanks for that. So yes, so the minutes were circulated, and then I'll take those as read, and at this stage, and I don't know if there's any matters arising. So much has happened. I've gone through those minutes. So much has happened, in 2020. A lot of what was, committed in 2019 has basically been done. So perhaps if I could just go around to establish if there's any matters arising from those minutes before I close the chapter, and so that we can take them as a true reflection as well of what transpired at the time. Right. I think that basically completes this session, and I'd like to call upon our Vice President, Kone Fente, who will then give us the President's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandile. Morning, everybody. Once again, I have to apologize. We've got some technology issues. I've been blocked by a firewall, so I'm connecting via my cell phone. So I apologize if the audio is intermittent. So just if there's any concerns, I'll be watching the screen just to make sure if anybody can't hear or I break up, please just raise your hand, and then we'll try and retract a bit. I think where to start. I think for the sake of not being repetitive, I thought, talking about the pandemic and the subsequent economic fallout, I think will actually not serve any purpose today. I think the impact is well understood, and I think any indicators or forecasts of any sort, I think, will be largely irrelevant. I think what is quite noteworthy, though, is that if you look at the year that's gone past, I think it's been enormously challenging for most of our members. And I think most of them had to critically review their respective businesses. And I think they had to take some drastic action to try and make sure that they go through into what I call a survival mode. I think, as you've noted from some of the presentations today, particularly Grenville around, quoting some numbers, I think there was an absolute decimation in terms of volume, revenue, and fleet. I think where we find ourselves currently is that most businesses are inwardly focused, and I think rightfully so. And I think what I'm trying to maybe communicate today is that I think Savrala plays a key role in times like these, where engagement with stakeholders stay critically important, particularly given the challenges ahead. I think when and how the recovery will take any type of form, what form it will take, I think is anybody's guess. But the one thing's for sure, I think the both leasing and car rental market is structurally settling at a significantly lower level than before. And I think what we would have to do is drive efficiency in our businesses, I think lower the cost to serve, and I think we will definitely see some significant change in the composition of the market, and I suspect we will see some consolidation in the various markets relatively soon. I think so as each of us are looking to try and become more efficient, more innovative, and remain competitive, I think Savrala plays a key role in obviously driving awareness to of our operating environment with all of our key stakeholders. I think one of those key stakeholders is government, and I think once again both Brian and Grenville has touched on that. I think if I had to highlight 3 key priorities for Savrala, I think they must be Arto, I think the new BE regulations, and I think then in the rental space, I think the upcoming AXA tender. I think whilst we continue our efforts as a collective through Savrala to mitigate as best possible, I think the catastrophic impact of Arto that it will have on both car rental and leasing, I think we need to stay focused in terms of what changes we can effect. I think that the time frame, I mean, as indicated before, is around 60 days. And I think if it's adopted in its current form, I think will definitely create some significant challenges for both industries. I think also high on the agenda is the new proposed BE regulations. I think particularly the preferential procurement conundrum. I think whilst we must acknowledge the good work that NAMSA has done, and they've made some significant progress to try and advance the BE and the automotive sector through the Automotive Industry Transformation Fund, that benefit will only really flow through to ourselves and our customers in the next 12 to 18 months. I think linked to that, if we then move on to the AXA tender, I think AXA might not fully appreciate the challenges we have, particularly around our procurement and the BE criteria that they will impose in terms of that tender. And I hope that through active engagement through Savrala, we can actually navigate this behalf of all the members that would apply for those concessions. I think I would like to reinforce the point I made in August earlier this year, that at the members meeting, I think industry collaboration and I think cooperation is now more important than ever. I think the other key stakeholder that one would need to obviously recognize is our automotive partners. And I think just once again, wanting to just express my gratitude for most of the CEOs and senior management that actually met with Sandile in the NSC through the last year. I think we really appreciate this opportunity, and I think it allows for some meaningful engagement. And I think it also gives us the opportunity to focus our efforts and share our challenges. I think the feedback that we've received was frank, honest, and positive. In particular, I think one of the concerns that was expressed was particularly around the Manufacturer of the Year Awards, MOTI Awards as they commonly known. I think what we've done is we've realigned our questionnaire, and I think it will go a long way in actually addressing some of these concerns raised by the various importers and OEMs. I think what I would like to do is to encourage the new NEC to continue to build on the MOTI momentum. And I think also, once again, let's celebrate the worthy winners later this month. I think as South Africa was built on change, I think so will our industry. As we contend with exponential change in technology, I think our environment will be influenced by legislation, which needs a strong, focused association, which I believe Savrala is well positioned to play that role. I think in conclusion, I would like to thank, the NEC and also Sandile for their role and support the past year. I think while much work has been done, I think the incoming NEC will definitely need to refocus and consolidate efforts around key priorities for the year ahead. It was my pleasure to serve on Savrala, and I wish the incoming NEC and the GM every success for the new year. I think if there's no questions or comments, I would like over to Warren. I would like to hand over to Warren to take us through some financials.
Okay, if Natalia can just maybe put the financial slides on for me. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so what you see in front of you is the abridged detailed income statement relating to the financial year ended June 2020, as well as the comparative 2019 and the budget that was approved last year in respect of the 2020 year in terms of the budget. Savrala is not a complicated organization, and as such, relative to its income streams and its costs, those are fairly limited. you will see that effectively in terms of the revenues for 2020, they were significantly higher than 2019 and well in excess of the budgeted expectation. And that allowed the deficit to be significantly less. You'll see at the bottom there, 27,000 against the budgeted loss of 478,000. This was also significantly better than the 2019 deficit, which was 406,000. In terms of other income, the interest is effectively interest earned on our reserves. And sadly, you will see that in terms of the MOTI function over the last couple of years, that the organization has had to self-fund some of the cost of that event. Hopefully going forward, and obviously COVID hasn't helped that for the current year, that will improve and that more members will participate, in which case the association won't have to facilitate funding the small deficit that seems to be the general norm of late. The operating expenses of 1,676,000 we'll go into in a little more detail in the next slide. But you'll see year on year, those costs are fairly similar in terms of their makeup. If I can just ask Natalia to go to the next slide. Okay, in terms of the expenditure of the organization, you'll see that in effect, there are four main contributing factors year on year. That is the accounting and administration fees. It is the computer and website expenses, the professional services, and the statistics. In terms of the accounting fee, obviously that's all the administration and the bookkeeping. In terms of the computer and website expenses, that is effectively the website management and upkeep. In terms of the professional services, that is the rental GM, as well as the MOTI survey and other professional services that are incurred on an ad hoc basis. In terms of the statistics, that is the fee paid to Lightstone on a monthly basis in order to generate the various statistics that form part of the presentations that are given to members. You will see that, as I said, year on year, those figures don't fluctuate too much. The subscriptions there are the amounts paid to our affiliate bodies, which are BUSA and Tourism Business Council South Africa. The meeting expenses, obviously less so now under COVID, but when we obviously had to book venues to facilitate the meetings. And what happened last year as well was effectively the bringing on of Vernon Pillay as a consultant to assist in the leasing section with regards to getting them a little bit more current and to assist Sandile with the work relating to the leasing section. So in effect, as I say, year on year, not too much has changed. The reality is that there was a small deficit, but obviously significantly lower than what was anticipated. Are there any questions with regards to the income statement and the expenses for the year ended June 2020? Okay, so if I can just ask that someone adopt those financials. Anybody?
I'll adopt them. It's
Thank
Grenville.
you. Thank you, Grenville. Okay, the next slide. Thanks, Natalia. Okay, as can be seen, this is the balance sheet. In terms of the association, one can see that it's very cash positive. The difference between 2020 and 2019 is merely a timing thing, in the sense that in 2020, the invoicing went out on the 30th of June. So effectively, the debtors are offset by the trade payables, which represent fees paid in advance, which are the subscriptions. So effectively, the reserves are pretty much all cash, which is always a good thing in the current economic climate. If we can then move to the budget, which is the next slide. Okay, with regards to the proposed budget for the 2020-2021 year, obviously the financial year end of the association fell in terms of the previous year in the middle of COVID. So in a way, the financial impact wasn't really felt last year, but the NEC did have a lot of deliberation obviously in terms of what had happened with the industry and the impact of COVID on the industry. And to that end, basically the proposed fee increase for the current year was taken at CPR, which is 4%. And the budget was effectively done on a break-even budget. So if you go and have a look, you will see that compared to the budget 2020 annual subscriptions, it's slightly higher, whereas it's slightly lower to the actuals received, but that comes about, as you will see when we go through the expenditure, as that is the amount that would need to be earned in order to cover the costs, which I'll be happy to tell you we have pretty much already received. In terms of the other income, you'll see that we did put in a 50,000 Rand deficit for the MOTI function. Obviously, as you have all been made aware, that function has now been postponed, so that should add effectively to the coffers. Probably not exactly 50,000 because obviously there will be certain costs incurred, but probably not the whole 50,000. So from an income point of view, we are expecting to facilitate a collection of 1.5 million, and that's to offset the following costs. If Natalia can just go to the next slide. So in order to break even, we need to cover the expenses again of 1.5 million. As can be seen, the normal costs are prevalent. In other words, it's accounting sec fees. You have your professional services and your statistics. The 38,000 assistant is in fact a consulting fee for the completion of the Savrala history book that is being put together, and that has already been paid. The computer and website development, again, is for the maintenance and upkeep of the database. So as can be seen, you know, the costs year on year are pretty similar. There's not a hell of a lot of what we would call wasteful expenditure, like our current incumbent government seems to have on their audit reports. And that will allow us to break even at the end of the year. Are there any questions relating to the budget? Okay, so if I could just ask someone to adopt the budget.
Adopt from Brian.
Thank you, Brian. And then I will pass back to Sandile to just carry on with the agenda.
Thank you very much, Warren. Well, at this stage, I think it's that time where we have to, you know, the meeting has got to, you know, appoint the auditors. Obviously, our auditors have always been Alchemy, and you know, say it's important for us to just reflect on a yearly basis on whether or not you know, we continue with Alchemy. We have not, you know, we don't have any at this stage, you know, auditors that we're looking at, but I think it's up to the AGM itself to make that decision. So I'll just open that one up to the floor, perhaps to indicate if we could, you know, continue with the current auditors, which is Alchemy.
Sandile, Brian here from my side. I'd say let's stick with Alchemy given the position we're in.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Noted. All right. The appointment of the secretary. Again, the secretarial work has been done by, you know, again, Alchemy, and you know, for a couple of years now. And I'd like to just find out from the floor if, you know, the floor is happy for us to, again, continue with Alchemy performing that function for us.
Brian here again. yes, let's stick with him.
Seconded.
The secretarial and accounting fees were reflected in the numbers that were flashed. I must also just indicate, normally that area would be presented by the president, but I think we just saw it fit that at least Warren presented this morning. You saw the numbers, what the secretarial and accounting fees. I think I just need confirmation that everyone is happy, and bearing in mind that we have already adopted the budget. But I think it's important just so that for the purposes of our records, that the accounting fee for the secretarial as well is adopted in this meeting as well. Any comments on that? All right, they say silences. I take it that, at this stage we'll continue. We obviously, 2020 has had quite an impact on us, and I think it's important that we maintain some level of continuity as well. So at this stage, I'll take it as, adopted, that, the AGM is pleased with the secretarial and the accounting fees applicable. We have one last item on the agenda before we hand over to our guest speaker. I'd like to just call upon Warren again to just handle this one important part and last section of our AGM, which is the election of basically just the office bearers, which now would include the presidency. Warren, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Sandile. Having gone through the first trials and tribulations of the voting for the rental and the leasing chair, we now move into the same space, but for the appointment of the president and the vice president of the association. So exactly the same protocols were followed in terms of obtaining nominations and confirming acceptance of those nominations. In terms of the presidency, there are currently two nominations, those being Corne Venter from Motus, as well as Grenville, who has already been appointed as the rental chair, but can hold two positions under the Constitution. So just to confirm with the two gentlemen that they are both prepared to stand.
I'll withdraw, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other nominations from the floor? Okay, so that makes this one slightly easier in the sense that then Corne is unopposed and is appointed as the president of the association. So congratulations to Corne. Normally we would have a great clapping of hands, but obviously we can't do that here. Moving on to the vice presidency. At this point in time, there's only one nomination. So unless there are any nominations from the floor, the current nominee is Derek de Vries from Standard Bank. And Derek, this confirms that you are happy to stand.
Happy to stand.
No nominations from the floor. Okay, so again, slightly easier. Congratulations to Derek, unopposed. So he is the vice president of the association for the incoming year. Congratulations. So just in closing then, in terms of the confirmation of the NEC, we have Corne Venter, Derek de Vries, Grenville Salmon, Ramasela Ganda, Brian Roos, and Linda Kambule. So congratulations to all of you. And back to Sandile.
Thank you very much. I think I'll come back during announcements and come back to welcome the new and also thank the outgoing NEC members. At this stage, I think it's important for us I'd like to just welcome our guest speaker, Gary Scott. and request that quick sort of bio, which I've sent to Natalia, if you could just take us through. We have a great relationship with NAMSA. I'd like to thank, the CEO of NAMSA, Mike Mabasa, who I've liaised with, and I know that initially we had, basically wanted the CEO of, or rather the president of NAMSA. Unfortunately, he wasn't available, but Gary, who also happens to be a member of this association, as in his capacity as the vice president of NAMSA, was available to honor the invite. It really gives me pleasure to hand over to them. But before he does, if Natalia, if you could perhaps just take us through Gary's bio.
With pleasure. So Gary Scott has been the CEO of Kia Motors South Africa since 2017, having first joined in 2002 from Deloitte. Kia Motors SA is the exclusive wholesaler and distributor of Kia Motors vehicles and parts in South Africa, Namibia, Swaziland, and Zimbabwe. Started in 1998, it is a top 10 brand by volume and has an SA market share of 3.5%. Kia operates via a network of 68 dealerships, of which 19 are directly owned. An optimist with passion for future solutions, Gary Scott has continuously chosen roles which allows him the latitude and authority to make a significant, positive, and lasting impact to the business, the industry, and society, operating from the highest level of leadership. He is also the Vice President of National Automobile Association of South Africa, NAMSA, representing importers and heading up the local market optimization pillar of the SA Automotive Master Plan. An avid runner, he is married with 3 children. He loves to travel and counts a 3-month work assignment in New York and a sabbatical in Spain and France as travel highlights. Wow, very well-traveled individual. Gary, I'm going to share my screen and hand over to you.
Natalia, thank you very much. I'm very aware that we are a bit pressed for time. I think, Sandile, you and a number of members will remember a banquet evening where the dignitary arrived very, very late and then continued to ramble for about 90 minutes. I think you've learned very well from that experience. So what you do is you put your guest speaker right at the end, and they effectively know exactly how much time they have left, which I think is 8 minutes. So I will contain my comments as best as possible to those 8 minutes. I think to Corne's earlier point, I'm not going to ramble on too much about COVID. I think the effects are well understood. But what we will do is just create some context in terms
if I may, Gary, I need to just, you have, let's take it up to 12 o'clock. And then we can always just have the announcements for the next 2-3 minutes afterwards. I think it should take us to 12:05. Okay.
100%. Well, the good news is that I will be no more than 15 minutes, even at my most verbose. So off we go. You can scroll on. Thank you, Natalia. So obviously, just to say thank you to acknowledge the outgoing and the incoming appointees, the office bearers. I think Savrala is a very, very important organization. I think your engagement with government has been critical during the lockdown period, and we obviously look forward to working with you further. Again, just apologies from Tim. He is attending a BMW AG meeting this morning, and I've stepped in on his behalf. And just to acknowledge Mr. Mike Mabasa, the CEO of NAMSA, whose beautiful slides these are. Mike's burnt the midnight oil to get us these slides, and I hope you'll find them very informative. I'm sure we'll be sharing a complimentary version for your reading pleasure, and hopefully that does encourage further engagement. On the first slide, I think what we really want to say, just present a picture of NAMSA. And the automotive sector is the mainstay of South Africa's industrialization landscape. And NAMSA itself plays an indispensable transformative role, contributing directly to sustainable development of this productive economy. And our members produce products and services that move people, goods and services, facilitate trade, create sustainable jobs, serve communities with transport needs, create prosperity and mobility for the people of South Africa. So for us, mobility matters. And I think this is exactly the line we took when we look to run our arguments around coming out of lockdown, is that, you know, without mobility, an economy really can't get going. And I think that was proven to be true. So this industry contributes 6.4% to the country's GDP. 4% of that is manufacturing and 2.4% in retail. The good news is that last year exports were on the rise. So that's exceptional growth, 10.2%. I think it also does show a slight decoupling of South Africa's fortunes from the global economy, you know, as exports becomes a bigger proportion of the channeling of the production of the automotive sector in the country. But 64% going out as exports is definitely a vote of confidence in South Africa's ability to produce world-class products for the global market. Thank you. In terms of employment, and you know, I think we're all obsessed with employment and solving the unemployment issue. So COVID's obviously put us under a lot of pressure. There are 110,000 employees in the industry's payroll on the manufacturing side. But when you look at the multiplier effect, when you look at the entire value chain, including retail, including components, and including yourselves, we're closer to 500,000 employees. So a really critical employer and a critical labor soak, particularly in the unskilled and semi-skilled space, which is of course where most of our labor force is. This industry contributes 29.9%, let's just call that 30% of the manufacturing output. And we're the 5th largest exporting sector out of 104 sectors in South Africa, accounting for 14.3% of total exports. So clearly a very important contributor to the balance of payments in terms of earning foreign currency. And despite this industry being a heavyweight in a South African context, when you look at it in global terms, we're actually quite far down. We're 22nd in the world, and that's 0.7% of global output. Just to give you, to put that in more real numbers, our vehicle park in South Africa is 12.7 million cars. You probably know that. The global vehicle park is over 1 billion cars. So we're a very small player, but a proud player and a growing player. Thank you. Just in terms of Brexit, not everyone has been affected equally. I think just to throw some numbers at you, 2019, we had 91 million cars produced. That was a 5.2% decline from the year before. This elusive 100 million production, 100 million continues to be elusive. The staggering thing is that this year we're looking at 70 million production for the year. And what's possibly for me more frightening, in this economy, this global economy, we're looking at the handful of factories that we proudly operate in South Africa. There are 768 manufacturing plants in the world. And, last year we were bemoaning the fact that, 92 million production, we opened 50 more factories and we closed 14. So a net gain of 36 additional factories, putting strain on obviously the throughput per factory. The production capacity of the world, 141 million. So when you're producing 70 million, you can imagine what a bloodbath that is. So that's the one thing I can say, particularly to our rental brothers and sisters, that we're in solidarity with you in terms of some of that pain that's been taken. I think that's felt right across the industry. China's had the most pain. 2.1 million vehicle decline last year, pre-COVID, and they have bounced back a little bit quicker, but that is that's a significant number in terms of the global production. There's 18 countries that are producing more, in normal times, more than 1 million cars a year. That's quite an important benchmark. South Africa is heading there, but we're not quite there yet. And just to give you an idea, in terms of that 600,000 odd we were speaking about earlier, the aspiration, in fact, the modeling requires for sustainability that this industry gets to a production capacity or production output of 1.4 million by 2035. You can imagine what kind of compound growth numbers that will require. And therefore, the role of government and the growth of the economy, critically important. We just can't create enough levers in business to get us there by ourselves. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So in terms of the export indicators, they're sound. Exporting vehicles remains key to generate the economies of scale. Our domestic market is not, we're not China, we're not the USA. We cannot justify having factories to support the South African, or the domestic demand for motor cars. We have to be exporting. And for the reasons I mentioned earlier, clearly it's desirable to be exporting as well. But Europe is currently 73.8% of those exports. And, it's quite interesting to think about Europe, because you look at the EV path that they're on, you look at those of you who visited Europe and you look at the cars that are on the road there, and you look at the cars that are selling in South Africa, there clearly is a mismatch, and that mismatch is set to continue. So I think that's telling us there's a lot of work to be done in terms of EV policy in this country, and maybe some exciting remodeling that will happen in the rental space and even in the leasing space as EV starts to play a bigger and bigger role in this economy. Vehicle exports to Africa declined marginally last year, but we look at Africa as we have to. We look at Africa as a long-term play, and regional demand is absolutely critical. When you look at successful manufacturing around the world, it's evident that regional demand is very important. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have 74% of our production, in fact more than that, 95% of our production going halfway across the world, to markets halfway across the world. We really need to be working hard to stimulate demand in the region. And there's a lot of headwinds there, but there's a lot of very good work being done on that. We can move on to the next slide. So despite, and I think we're all aware, the last 6 years, our domestic market has been declining. There has been capital expenditure by the OEMs. And as I said earlier, a record number of 631,000 were produced last year. 387,000 of those were exported, 151 countries, and 10.2% growth. But going all the way back to 95, the automotive industry has made significant strides. We had the MIDP program. We then had and have the APDP program, and that is due to be replaced. It was due to be replaced this year, probably now going to be implemented middle of next year, the South African Automotive Master Plan. And the key thing there is that is a 15-year plan. So it gives policy certainty, it gives a framework for investment and for market development to happen. We're working very hard with government now to bed that one down. Next slide. So we know that South Africa's main challenge is to get the millions of unemployed youth into jobs. So, depending on which way you want to read your unemployment stats, you can pick a number north of 50%. But the most critical thing is that in the age group 15 to 24, we're over 70% unemployment. That's definitely not sustainable. In fact, the word we would use is catastrophic. So as a country, we need to get these young people into employment. We need to do it urgently. We need to upskill young people for work. And clearly policy reforms, as unpopular as they may be politically, they're essential to make this economy much, much more labor intensive. We need to find a way to soak up the unskilled labor. There's no denying, the effect that COVID has had. Our GDP fell 16% between first and second quarters of this year. And on an annualized basis, it worked out to a 51% shrinkage. Overall manufacturing shrank 74.9%. And, our sector was not unaffected. Government debt continues to climb. And borrowing costs and government bond yields will clearly be affected. That's the little bit of doom and gloom, but we won't linger on that. On to the next slide. So it's nice to see a slide with more green than red. I don't think too many of us are seeing many of these at the moment. But if you look at last year, pre-COVID, I think there was momentum being built. Exports were up, production was up, lots of positivity in terms of the rand value. We bridged 200 billion in terms of export revenue, and on the back of that, further investment and further employment in the manufacturing side. 3-year wage agreement signed without industrial action. So coming into COVID, we had lots to be hopeful about. If we look at the next slide. Suddenly a lot more red. How much of this is transient? Some of it certainly is. Some of these things are longer term structural things and with us to stay for a while. But we continue to see export momentum. Certainly just before COVID, the first quarter of the year, we came out of the blocks very quickly. And we expect that to renormalize and see that back up in an upward trajectory. Clearly, some of the macro factors like interest rates, never been a better time to buy a car. That's the slogan we would all use. Fuel price coming down and depreciation of rand, not great for imports, but certainly has stimulated the export side of the business, of the industry. Next slide. But where are we going? This is really the important point. What are we facing? Is it an L-shaped recovery? So a longer period of quite unsexy dithering around. Is there a V-shaped recovery? Is it a smoother sort of U-shaped recovery? Nobody knows. What we do know is that we need to recover to those pre-COVID levels in this industry by 2022. If we have any hope of getting to the assumptions of the automotive master plan, that 1.4 million I mentioned, and this is the burning platform that NAAMSA seeks to create with the DTIC and with other government departments in terms of the success and sustainability of the master plan program. Those engagements are ongoing. I think government does move slower than we would like. I think government's frustration might be that we always look for, that business tends to look to them to bail us out. I think there's a meeting of the minds that needs to happen. But certainly the recovery to 2022 is not going to happen in 2022 alone. We need to see some of that already happening in the first year. And more on that a little bit later. On to the next slide, really just to give you some context in terms of global, how deeply some of the other countries have suffered and how quickly some of them have bounced back. You can certainly see, COVID started in China and they've gone positive already in June in terms of their recovery. India started to pick up again. I would say India is really on the back of some own goals last year, so that growth is a little bit flattering. But South Africa clearly not unaffected, and the evidence of the hard lockdown in April, quite obvious. And we know that vehicle sales is a leading indicator of economic health and economic recovery. We're not seeing it yet. I think we're seeing almost a new normal. We're seeing a fairly stable volume of sales, and we need to watch this very carefully. We need to make sure that government does see this new normal as abnormal and not as the status quo to be maintained. That 30% is probably where we see the market for the balance of the year. We'll be 30% down year on year in terms of new vehicle volumes. 40% on exports. Thank you. Okay, so what has NAAMSA done? We've recently commissioned a study to investigate and to make recommendations on how South Africa can stimulate demand for new vehicles. And this is really because of the need under the master plan to get our industry going. Why do we deserve special treatment? Because of everything I said at the start. We are the key source of industrialization. We are the number one exporter, therefore the number one earner of foreign currency, and 500,000 jobs. We are a massively key industry. Automotive fails in this country, the country will fail. It really is as simple as that. The process that we undertook was we appointed B&M analysts. They went around the world and said, what are the other 21 countries, the 21 countries that are ahead of us in terms of their vehicle manufacturing output? What have they done? They've had a look at that. They've then polled industry players, captains of industry, and tried to understand their views around what sort of solutions could drive the stimulus, and then looked as experts around what's practical and possible. And this is what they've come up with to show you on the next slide. surprisingly, many of these countries are not providing any specific support. One country was found to be stimulating demand in general. Only 6 countries have instituted specific automotive demand. I think, many of these countries, and certainly our own country, we don't have a lot of fiscal space to move to be writing checks. And I think that was very evident in terms of the discussions and the brief with the consultants and with government early on, that don't expect us to write a check, and that hasn't been the approach. So if we move on to the next slide. These were our recommendations, or these were the recommendations of BNM, endorsed by the CEO Council of NAMSA and presented to Minister Patel about 2 weeks ago. The model, just to share with you where we are, has been sent back to the local market optimization committee, which has broad representation. Treasury is on there, SARS obviously specifically is on there, and industry and labor. Everyone who needs to be on this is on this. The first thing we've asked for is removal of the CO2 tax. And the approach here is that we're looking at elasticity. So we're not asking that government to create a hole in the fiscus or to make a hole even bigger. What we're saying is if you make cars more affordable, more cars will be sold, and the additional money you make on the other taxes will more than make up for the hole created by the removal of this tax. Why CO2 tax? Well, it's an unfair tax. It's not ring-fenced. It isn't applied to to any sort of green initiative. It doesn't actually drive behavior either of the consumer or of the OEM or importer, because fundamentally we are looking to bring product to market that is price relevant, and we're also somewhat stymied by the poor fuel quality in the country that really limits our ability to bring more fuel efficient engine technology into the country. So it's an unavoidable tax. So we believe removal of the CO2 tax on cars, either temporarily or long-term structurally, is going to free up almost 12,000 sales on an annual basis. So call it 1,000 cars a year. The second one, the ad valorem tax. Now this is a luxury tax on a sliding scale that really sits on top of your duty structure. And what that means is effectively your smaller cars have a lower tax and your bigger cars have a higher tax. Of course, your smaller cars are typically more price elastic, more sensitive to a price reduction. So this is somewhat counterintuitive. But what we've actually found, or what BNM found through the study, looking at 12 years of sales and millions of data points, is that the middle of the market is actually the most elastic. And so there is a real ad valorem effect there, and 16,500 car sales could result from this adjustment of the formula. This formula has never taken inflation into account. So that sort of bracket creep that we experience in our income tax, our personal income tax, as you're all aware, that gets adjusted on an annual or biannual basis. This has never been adjusted, and so we're paying too much for our cars, bottom line. So 16,000 sales could be released out of that. The third one was a VAT policy adjustment on private leasing. And the thinking there is to create a cash flow advantage. So not to reduce VAT, simply to create a cash flow advantage by allowing VAT to be recovered monthly rather than being capitalized upfront. And we believe that will attract more private purchases through the leasing channel, which is quite interesting. It's clear that this market needs alternative methods of purchase to be stimulated for the consumer, because right now, probably the biggest structural restriction on how many cars are sold is how many finance applications get approved through the banking system. So I think this one's quite exciting. The fourth one is a set aside for transport operators. Now this is in your medium and heavy commercial side, and that's not going to be massive from a volume perspective, and probably not that relevant from a Savrala perspective. But nothing's really ever been done on this side, and so we're asking government to have a look at that. The fifth one is on RT57. As we know, and I know painfully as an importer, we entered the year 13 Rand and change to the dollar. We've gone as high as 1850, 19, and we're tracking around the 1650 mark. And clearly that, as an input variable, is going to cause price inflation. And so in terms of government purchases, what we're asking government to do is give some relief to the OEMs and importers around their pricing. Anytime you launch an infrastructure spend program, you're going to kickstart the economy. The question is, does the government have the room to move to embark on a program like that? We've put it in for discussion. I think the point I really want to drive home, and if we can move on to the next slide, is that, with all of these stimulus items, giving ourselves the restriction of trying to keep this fiscally neutral, you're only creating at best 15, 20,000 additional sales. You're not getting anywhere near back to the market that we had, and you're not getting anywhere near back to the market that we need. So on a market that's been consistently running at the 550, 530, slightly declining market, but certainly north of 500,000. If we're going to end this year on, maybe 370, 380,000, adding another 20,000 to that is a step, but it's not actually enough. What I think we painfully aware of, and just to endorse what Dr. Brian Ruiz said earlier, the rental and leasing business is 13 to 18% of that volume. And if we look just at rental, there's going to be a 50,000 unit hole this year alone. Now that's 2 to 3 times the size of the hole we're trying to fix through dealer channel in terms of stimulation. And so, I want to give the comfort to Savrala that NAAMSA is deeply invested in your success. We're joined at the hip. And so in terms of, the opportunities to collaborate, to co-create obviously in a non-competitive way, but to grow the pie, to stimulate demand and to drive volume, we're absolutely committed to that collaboration and would welcome, more formal workshopping, more formal collaboration, and assisting through our channels to government, giving you a voice or strengthening the voice that you already have. Sandile, I think you've done a great job on that already, but strengthening the voice that you have to make sure that we can get your industry and its contribution to our industry as manufacturers back up to where it needs to be. That's critically important. The last point I'll make is that, and I think Corné touched on it earlier, apart from writing a check, even if we can convince government that writing that check is fiscally neutral and that it will take some brave new thinking to get us to that point, and probably a lot of deliberation, and I don't believe likely to see anything from the president this afternoon in this regard, but hopefully in the budget speech only in February. But aside from that, it's really to make sure that policy and implementation doesn't create own goals that threaten the viability of the industry. I think R2 is a massive problem, and we need to use all of our lobbying power collectively and individually to sing from the same hymn sheet, to quantify the effect, to quantify it in emotive terms around job losses, around business closure, and around deindustrialization. How much of that, how much of the risk to your industry is a direct impact on the manufacturing demand, or the demand on the manufacturers in this country? It's critical. It's absolutely critical. And the two others that I would highlight are grey imports, and you will have read in the press recently what we're doing around grey imports, and we're engaging with police, treasury, SARS, DTIC on this matter as well. Grey imports is what has killed the motor industry in many countries and is preventing the industry starting, industrializing in many other African countries. Grey imports are massive risk, and it needs to be tackled. And the last one in my mind is the code 2s and code 3s. Insurance write-offs that are finding their way back onto the road. One of the speakers mentioned eNatus as something that needs work. I concur. I think that our ability to engage with DOT is very, very compromised. I think one thing that's become evident in the work that we've done with NADA during the lockdown period, we've had a lot of positivity, even if it's just in terms of alignment, that's come out of one voice with NADA. I think in terms of our one voice with Savrala going forward, that itself is going to be very key. How are we able to effectively lobby and constructively engage the Department of Transport? I think we can all admit that is a piece of work to be done right across the industry. In conclusion, I think it's self-evident. New vehicle sales are linked to the strength of the economy. We need, in your world, we need cars to crash. Unfortunately, we need that replacement industry to pick up. We need tourism to pick up, whether it's domestic or international. We need both of those things to happen. And we need business to get moving again. We need people to be traveling. We need people to get off the Teams calls and onto the planes. And we're fully in support of that renormalization of the market and our society. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. If you have a question, please feel free to either raise the non-verbal cue, hand raised, or perhaps in the chat, let us know if you'd like to ask a question. And thank you so much for that, Gary. That was wonderful.
Great pleasure.
Any questions? Doesn't look like it. Last chance. Okay, I think we are going to call it. Right, Sandile, if I could just hand back to you then for the general and announcements part of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Let me again thank Gary for quite a sobering, presentation. It's really, it's given us, something to think about. I think I've got a few takeaways, which I will certainly share again with Mike. I must thank NAMSA and, Mike for having arranged this. Certainly, where our relationship goes a long way. As you know, we've had, collaboration that started way back when we managed to get some dispensation from SARS, and we continue to do so. I work very closely with Mike, for instance, in the BUSA front, certainly in some of the subcommittees within BUSA, the economic and social committee of BUSA. ARTO does remain one of the key legislations, so acts that we are looking at this stage. But yes, thank you very much. Perhaps need I also just mention that the impact of coronavirus, we at least are also an invited part of the EV subcommittee. I think the EV is quite an important initiative and development. If you look at our counterparts, both in the US, which we, by the way, liaise very greatly with, and particularly during COVID, I've had the opportunity to liaise with, both in the US and in Britain. And EV is certainly, on their agenda. And knowing fully well that we are also part of the NAMSA EV subcommittee and will continue to do so. Thank you once more for a lovely presentation. I think we have a lot to take from your presentation. With your permission, I think we'll make it also just available to our members as soon as Mike gives me the go-ahead or whatever version that I can share with our members. At this stage, just to move on to perhaps just the general announcement, you may recall that a couple of days ago, I sent out a notification to just make the members aware of the decision that was taken by the NEC. We know how important MOTI is to our OEMs, and this basically just is, it captures just the letter or that I wrote to the members. I must say that the deliberations were long, and we looked at all the pros and cons, and certainly it wasn't an easy one. And I'm sure you'll agree with me at the time that I think it was the most prudent thing to do. It's not, all is not lost, as it were. I need to just indicate that I've indicated that towards the end of October, I could not put a date there. We had targeted the 22nd, which was meant to be the date on which the awards were going to take place. And hopefully I should know by this evening or tomorrow. I'm liaising very closely with Lightstone as well, just the finalization of one or two things relating to the MOTI awards, or rather the MOTI results. But I think the winners will be announced certainly at the end of October. But I will send out a formal communication again on how these will be conducted certainly. I think if you could just move on to the next. Let me at this stage, thank everyone. And in particular, I'd like to thank the outgoing NEC. One of the key things that was decided, I think, has been on the agenda of the NEC is to basically take the level of the NEC up there, and I think we've managed over the years, and we've seen the likes of Rainer, who was the CEO of Avis, being part of the NEC. We've seen, for instance, Francis. I'd like to say thank you to them, and George again, who's the ops executive at Bidvest, who are the outgoing, and welcome the incoming. And I look forward again. We are even much more strengthened. Ramasela being the current CEO of Avis, and obviously we've got Derek, who's just come in, and I'd like to welcome those who are new, together with Linda. I look forward to working with yourselves. It's important that in the spirit of the whole recovery, I think we spoke about, there are certain things, just before COVID came in, you may recall that we had these stakeholder meetings that I had with the various CEOs, where we penciled exactly what the needs of our members are. There's been some changes, obviously, because of COVID, but right now the focus is certainly on recovery. And some of our priorities, which obviously will be hashed out by the NEC, are talking just restoring our businesses. They're talking basically ensuring adherence to protocols. It's important for us to adhere to those protocols, because we used those as a board member in the Tourism Business Council of South Africa. That's part of what we used to get at least ourselves, listened to. And we've also used those to give comfort to would-be visitors, as Granville indicated, how important the inbound section of our business is to us. So it's important that also just so that we make sure that we keep the levels of this virus down. It's important that we adhere to those protocols. I think we'll continue lobbying, looking at various policies, looking at the legislation, and ARTO being number one at this stage. There are quite a few which were mentioned also by Kone, BE, certainly we need to look at that as well. And we've had, we wrote a letter to request for some sort of dispensation during COVID, right at the center of COVID. I think I gave feedback on that the last time as well. But that belongs to the DTI. So, we'll still follow up on all of those. I think the last but one is basically aligning with industry. To me, it's important that we align with industry. The likes of NAMSA, who are very, very important to us, will continue obviously aligning with others, the RMI of this world, the RFA, and all of these, organizations are important. Our association with the TBCSA, which is the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, and BUSA certainly remains very, very important. We indicated the last time that we look at engaging, the relevant ministries and those ministries that are key to our business. And DOT is one of those. So is tourism, and the Department of Trade and Industry will look at that. One last thing that I think is important that was also mentioned, I think, by Grenville and Brian, is the resuscitation of our subcommittees. And it's only by participating that these things are successful. Whilst I could be there to coordinate, to, and chair some of these a lot of these subcommittees, but the participation of members is very, very important. And it's just something that I'd like to, plead that our members continue to encourage, their staff to participate in that. Again, we'll continue the consultation with all the members, obviously, I think, on an ongoing basis. I'd like to really thank you for a successful AGM, albeit quite unusual. Unlike Natalia, some of us are, we kind of not used to this sort of thing, and I've kind of relied on Natalia to do this for me, but thank you very much. And I hope that the next time we meet, certainly with, especially with AGM, it will be in person like it's always been for years. And I look forward to working with the new NEC, and they will obviously hear from me on when our next first session will be in the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Keep safe and take care.
Cheers,
Thank you,
Sandile.
Sandile.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely,
Thank you, Sandile.
Thank you, Sandile.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thank you. Thank you.